Hi, welcome back to part 3 of my mini album tutorial where I'm showing you from start to finish how to put together a mini album. If you have not seen part 1 and 2 and you're interested in seeing how we put all the pages together and the cover, then I will put a link in the description box below. In part 3 we're going over pockets and pattern paper. So here is the paper that I'm using. It's Cosmo Cricket circa 1934, and this is super cute paper. So I've already cut out my paper. You want to cut out your paper at 7 1/8 by 5 1/8. If you want more of a black border to go on your page, then you want to cut it at 5 by 7, but I like just a little slim black border around it. And when you're cutting down 12 by 12 and you're cutting them at 5 1/8 by 7 1/8, here are the scraps that you'll have cut off. So with these, you can actually get out of one piece, you can get 2 5 1/8 by 7 1/8 out of one 12 by 12 paper. So it makes your pattern paper go a lot further. Being that I'm doing a smaller album, I cut one of each, and I've already adhered all my tape to the edges of the paper. I left one just to show you how I do it. I'm using my 1/4 inch tape, and what I like to do is add the tape to the top and bottom first, and I'll show you why when we go ahead and adhere the paper. This is how I like to do my mini albums. I like to start decorating the pages, the base of the book. I like to add the pattern paper and some of the pockets before I add it onto my spine or my hinge. I just find it easier to work that way than when the book is already started to be put together. So I went ahead and add my tape to the top, the bottom, and then the two sides. Next thing I like to do is, well, allow me to show you what I already have cut out. Now this here is a mat that will go inside one of the pockets. So the pocket will fit in the hinge here. Okay, so that'll fit inside of that. I may have to cut this down a little, but that'll adhere to this. And then this will be the pocket on the side that slides in. Okay, so let me show you. I have an album right here that I can show you. I love the look of this, so I do this on all my albums. So as you can see, all of them have these tabs on the side here, and these pull out mats so you can add more photos to them. Okay, so what I do is I've designed this on my Cameo, but if you do not own a Cameo, it's no big deal. All you have to do is cut out a matching paper, the black, 4 1/2 by 7, and use some sort of tab punch. Here I've used the McGill, and this one is the 3-inch tab punch. I don't believe they sell this anymore, but I do know that Stampin' Up! Sells one, and several other places have one. So you would just add the tab to the top. If you don't want to use a tab at all and you would rather use a decorative punch, then you will probably have to make this about a 5-inch. You would just have to play around and look at that. So I'm just showing you here how this can be done. I've done the exact same thing, however I've added this in my Cameo, and I also have a video on that if you're interested. It's a silhouette tutorial adding tabs. So it's basically the same thing. So you'll see me using these, but I just wanted to show you how you can do it if you don't have a Cameo. Okay, so let me set that aside. The next thing I'd like to show you is how I make a pocket page with a flip over. Again, let me show you in the album what I'm referring to. So right here we have a pocket with a bracket, and it has a magnetic closure, and it's allowed a pocket here to add journaling cards or photos. I like it for photos. So again, I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. What I've done is cut a piece of paper that is the exact same size as the pocket, the finished pocket, which is 7 1/4 by 5 1/4. Okay, and this I have made in my Cameo. This is 7 1/8 by 3 1/2, and I'll show you how we're going to score it. If you do not have a Cameo, let me show you if you do not have a Cameo, you just want to cut out a piece of paper 7 1/8 by 3 1/2 and use some sort of edge punch if you'd like the look of that. And then from the straight edge, you want to score in 3/4 and 5/8. Okay, and I'll show you as we go. Again, I will be using this bracket just because I love the look of this. However, if you don't own a Cameo, this is the way to do it. So the only other thing I want to tell you about this ahead of time is we're going to be adding all our pattern paper. You want to decide what page you want to do this pocket on and decide that ahead of time. I wrote it on the back so I don't forget, because we're going to be adding a magnet and you want to do that before adhering the paper down. Okay, so that's a pocket that we'll be adding. The other thing that we will be adding is pockets to certain pages. So again, for an example, this pocket here. I also do scallop pockets. You can use an edge punch, and again a different scallop pocket here, just for examples. The pocket I have here is 6 1/4 by 3 1/2, and we're going to be scoring a 1/2 inch on both sides and the bottom. Again, I have this cut out from the Cameo, so this is a way to do it. If you don't have a Cameo, it's the same thing. The difference is I've added my score lines in the Cameo, so it's already scored for me. But I will show you, so you'll see me using these, but I will also go ahead and use this one so you can see how to do it if you'd like to do it this way. Okay, so I think that is all of the pockets to prepare ahead of time. So now what I'd like to do is here's all my pockets that I've made, my ones we made in part 1. I like to go ahead and set out my papers to decide what order I want them to go in. And you also want to set aside a piece of paper for your front and back cover for both the outside and inside. And I have not cut those yet, but you just want to make sure you have paper, at least one piece of paper for the front and back cover and one for the inside. So now I'm just going to kind of go through and decide how I want my book to look. Okay, and now that that's going to be my first page, I'm going to flip it over and start adding in pages. Just seeing what I like next to each other. Okay, so this is how my book is going to look. I am going to adhere all my papers down except for the one that I have set aside for a pocket. And let me just show you how I do that before I put it in Fast Play. So this is my first page. The reason I put the tape here and here first is that way I can remove the tape backing from just the top piece, and then I can slide this around gently and find out exactly where it is lined up. And once I'm happy with that, then I can press this down, lift this up, and then remove the rest of the papers. And then that way I know it's lined up exactly where I want it. It's so much easier to line it up this way. Okay, so now that I got that, I'm going to flip this over and just continue adding all of my papers, like I said, except for the one with the magnet pocket. So I will fast forward through this. So I've added all my papers to my pages except for the one that I want to add a pocket to. So let me go ahead and set these aside. Now, The reason I am doing it like this is because if I took this piece, which will eventually flip over and magnetize on this, if I just glued it in this against this, then I can't use this pocket for one of my tab pages to still fit in. So I wanted to use every single one. I want to get as much room in this album for pictures as possible. So I still want to be able to put one of these mats inside. So that's the reason I designed it the way I'm doing, is so I can add a pocket plus still get the tab inside. So on this one, this is the one I was going to use, but as you can see I got something on it, so I'm going to go ahead and use another one. And I'm going to score that. And I want to reiterate, if I can, that, let me see where here it is. If you do not have a cameo and you do not have this shape, you can use whatever shape you would like on the edge. That's basically all I did here. Was I designed my own edge on my paper. If you don't have a cameo, you don't have to do that. Just cut a piece of paper 7 1/8 by 3 1/2, and from the straight edge, let me show you on this, you want to score it at 3/4, and then the line right before it, which is 5/8. Okay, so what you're doing is giving yourself a little bit of room for when you fold it over. So cut a piece of paper at 3 1/2 by 7 1/8, score it at 3/4, and the line right before it at 5/8. And then you will do everything the exact same that I'm going to show you. I'm just using a different one. So I'm still scoring it at 3/4 and 5/8. Okay. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is make sure it fits in my pocket well, and it should be pretty snug. You don't want a big gap, and you're going to glue it right to that first score mark. Let's see if you can see that here. There's 2 score marks. I'm going to glue it right to the first score mark without going over that. And for this, I'm going to use wet glue. And the reason I'm using wet glue is it gives me a chance to move it before it sets. So it'll give me a little time to play with it before I have to worry about it setting. And here I'm just using my Scotch Quick Dry. In this album, I'm only doing 1 page like this. If I do a double this size album, I usually do 2 pages. So if you're going to do that, you want to know ahead of time which page you're going to be doing. So I'm sliding that in right before that score line. Because I was using the wet glue, I was able to do that. And again, I wanted to make sure that my paper on this side is directionally correct, because the pocket's going to flip over this way. Okay, so while that's drying, I'm going to add a magnet. I will be using Glossy Accents, and one of these tiny magnets that I talked about earlier, I will link in the description box where I got that, or you can use basic gray magnets. So I'm just going to add a little dot of Glossy Accents right here, and my magnet right there. Having a hard time separating them. They're very tiny, but they're very strong. Okay, so I'm going to give this a minute to dry, and I'll be right back. Okay, while this is still drying, I'm going to set that aside. And what I want to do is use my centering ruler again. You can eyeball this if you prefer. And this is 7 1/4, so Okay, so I'm going to mark this with my pencil right where the center is of this. And I'm using I believe this is a 1.5 inch. This might be 1 3/4 inch circle punch. And if you notice on either side of our punches, we have a center of the punch. So using my guide, this white circle here was just reminding me I needed to punch that out. So I'm going to slip it in here using these guides right here on the side. I know that I'm halfway through, so I'm going to use that, and I'm just going to eyeball this. Okay, and I'm going to punch that out. Then what I would like to do is use my piece of pattern paper that's going to sit on top of this. So I want to just kind of hold this on there, leaving the small border, making sure my border is even on all sides. And once it is, I'm going to flip it over, mark with my pencil, and then this way I can cut it out as well on this. Okay. Now while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to just go ahead and add tape along here as well, because once this is adhered down, I want to make sure it's really not going to move. Okay, so now the next step is I'm going to, again, while my magnet is still drying, I'm going to adhere this. Once I adhere this, this will then become our pocket to add lots more photos in. So to do that, I'm going to add glue to both sides and the bottom, leaving the middle open so I can get photos in it. And the sides. Again, using wet glue because it gives me a chance to move it around if I need to, plus dry adhesive or tape, once you add photos, could possibly stick to either journaling cards or photos. So it's really best to use some sort of wet adhesive on this. Okay, so I really want to make sure that's down. And once it is, I'm going to fold on those score lines. I will even use my bone folder just to make sure I have a good crease on both score lines. The second score line is to give you a little bit of room, that way the pocket can expand a little if you have lots of photos in it. Okay, so now that I've done that, what I need to do is take my other magnet, let it adhere to this, just drop it and it'll adhere to that. And then I want to add my glossy accents to the back of this magnet and close this magnet down. And it will miss that little cutout, and that way you know it's folded perfectly. Now sometimes it'll still stick to the top. Let me see if this one is. Okay, no, that one was dry enough that it stuck down here. So that now we know that's a perfect fit. So now I want to go ahead and adhere my piece of paper on top. So I'm going to remove just the top pieces like I did all the rest of them. And I like to add a little bit of extra glue right around that magnet so I know that the paper is adhered well right around that. Okay, so now I've just removed the top of the tape from the top of the page, and now I'm going to add my pattern paper, leaving the same amount of gap of paper all the way around. Okay, and then I'll remove the rest of the tape here and adhere it down. Okay, so now we have our flip-up page with our magnetic closure, and that leaves us a pocket to add lots more photos in. And it leaves the bottom here open to adhere to our book. So I'm going to put that back in the book the way I like. Now the next thing I like to do is add some of my pockets that I'd like to add. So one of the pockets I showed you, you can use a decorative edge however you choose to do it. It is cut at 6 1/4 by 3 1/2. And now I'm going to score it 1/2 inch on all 3 sides. Flip it around and score it on this side. And then one of the long sides. Okay. Now what you want to do is miter the corners. So again, just like we did in part 1 with the pages, I'm cutting from the score line out just a little bit, and I'm going to do the same thing along here. I'm cutting right along those score lines, right to the middle where the 2 score lines meet. I'm going to cut straight across. That's going to take away any bulk when I'm folding my page or my pocket. So now I'm going to fold in on that. I want to fold this way. Normally I would fold the other way. You want to go where that bump is, but being that my writing is on this side. Okay, and now let's take a look. This should fit perfectly on your page as a pocket. And then with that fold line in the bottom, it allows you to get your mat quite a bit further in. So let me just decide here where I want to add this page to, and I'm going to add it to here. So again, I like to do this before ever putting the papers on my hinge. You can choose to do it differently, and I like to use wet glue for this as well. So I'm going to add wet glue on all 3 of these tabs. And just make sure it's even on the bottom and the sides, and hold that there for a minute. And now you can, if you want to add another piece of pattern paper, which is what I usually do, you just simply want to measure it and leave a little bit of a border, but we will get to that during the decorating part of this tutorial. Okay. Now in the beginning I showed you that I made these from the Cameo, so I'm just going to adhere that down real quick. It's the exact same concept. The difference is I did not cut out a tab on the bottom, so I'm just going to add a little glue to the page itself and add that on. You just want to butt that up to the very bottom of your page and make sure it's glued down real well. And I believe I want another page in here, and I think I'll do the page on this one here. So I will use another one of these and glue it down. Okay. So now this is the point where I will add my pages onto my hinges. I still sometimes go back and add another pocket or two if I choose to, but I just like to do most of the base. So what I'm going to do here is I'm keeping my book in order of the way I want it to be. Okay, so I set that aside and I will grab it page by page. This is going to be my first page. So if you imagine that your hinge is in your book like this, this will be the very first tab, will be your first page. So you want to adhere it face down because this will be the front of your book like this. Okay, so you want to adhere it face down. So again, this is going to be my first page. What I'm going to do is fold this over, remove the tape backing only from this side. Now, this is the front of my book. I want to remember that and face it down. Fit these in here. I should have checked first if I need to cut a little bit off. And it does look like this is a little bit long. So let me put my tape backing on. Sometimes you should check that first. I should have, and I forgot to. No big deal. I'm going to add my tape back on. I'm going to take this to my big trimmer and just cut off a little bit. I'm just going to eyeball it and I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back. This is the amount that I cut off. So probably about 1/8. No, not too much. So again, I'm going to remove my backing. This is my first page, so I want to face it down. And I want to insert this in here up to the score line, but do not cover the score line. So once I get it right where I want to press that down. And let me see if you can get a view of this. Not sure how well I can show you this, but the score line, it's right before the score line. There we go. Okay, so once you have that side down, now you can flip it over, reach in here, and it helps to use something like this. Pull up that tape and press it down. Okay, and you just want to do that again. Here's the next page of my book. This is how it's going to be. So I'm going to flip it this way, pull this off, just the one side, slide this in. You don't want to press it until you can see on both sides that you have it right where you want it. Once you do, press it down, flip it over, reach in with something to help you and pull off that tape, press it down. Okay, and you always want to put your book back in the direction that it's going. Okay, this is going to be my next page that's going to sit like this. So being that the fold is on this side, I'm going to remove the tape from this side. I've turned my page over. And now we want to slide it in. Up to, but not on the score line. Okay, and press that down. Go back and remove this side. And then press that down. Now this is the side with the pocket, but yet, so here's the pocket here. When you flip this open, we have our large pocket here for tons of photos, magnetic closure, but now it's still open here for one of those tabs. Okay, so now that we've reached the other side of the pages, we're gonna, this is the next page of my book. I don't have to flip it over like I was doing. I'm gonna leave it like it is and put it on like this way because it's easier to remove. I'm not working against the hinge here, I'm working with it. So it's easier to remove this side. Open this up, grab it in here, and just kind of work that in there. Again, all the way up to the score line, but don't touch the score line. It's actually right before the score line. Okay, and when you're happy with it, press it down and remove the tape from the other side. Okay, so I've completed adding all my pages to my hinge. And now the next thing we need to do is add it into the spine of the book. Now what I do is I just look at it before I ever remove the tape backing, and I just want to make sure there's enough space on this side as to this side. And you just try and eyeball it as best as you can. So as you remember, there was still a spot in the middle for some tape. I'm going to add some tape to that now. I'm going to go ahead and remove my 2 pieces of tape backing because we want to make sure that the spine is very strong. So I want to make sure it's completely covered in tape. If you're more comfortable with doing this part with wet glue, you can do it with wet glue as well. That gives you a chance to kind of move it around a little. The only thing about that is if you move it around, depending on what type of wet glue you use, it might leave a glossy residue, or a glossy, it might leave a little glossiness. So might want to be careful with that if you do that. So what I like to do is start with the bottom first. I already know, because I looked at it ahead of time, about where I want to set it. And I want to set this down on the bottom first. Watch up at the front and kind of gauge it as I'm slowly setting it down. I don't want to press it down at this point, because if I have to pull it up and move it, then I can. Just like that, I wanted to move it over a little bit to the right. Okay, so now I can see it's got a perfect amount in between. So now that I'm happy with it, I'm just going to press down on the entire thing, and then I'm going to open up each page and press down on that binding. I don't want to use my bone folder for this, because you can tear that binding. So just go through and completely press that down. Be careful when it comes to your pockets that you don't pull down on them. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do is add my covers to the front and the back. The very last thing you ever want to do is add your front and back covers, because your book will get stuff on it. So you want to leave that till the very end. The inside covers are 7 3/8 by 5 5/8. So the 7 3/8 is the big tick mark before the half. So it's a little bit smaller than 7 1/2, because our book is 7 1/2 by 5 3/4. So we're leaving just a little bit of border. Okay, so again, that's 7 3/8 by 5 5/8. If you want more of a black border, then you can choose to do more of a black border, but this is what I like to do. So I added my tape already. I'm going to remove the tape just on the back, or on the top. This way I can move this around, get it exactly where I like, trying to leave the same amount of border around the entire page. Okay, and once I'm happy with that, I'm going to press this down, lift it up, and do the back side. I do also, if I remember, I like to add a little bit of wet glue in the middle as well. Just a tiny amount. And then make sure all your edges are pressed down. Okay, and the same on the back side. And a little bit of wet glue. Okay, so let me set this aside, and the next thing I'd like to show you is, let me show you from a book that I've previously done. In the front cover, I like to do a flip up, and here is one here. It has a magnetic closure, and when you open it up, you can add a photo here and a photo here. So I'm going to show you how we do that. On this one, I added ribbon, so I just want to point that out to show you if you want to add ribbon to yours. So the first thing I'm going to do, this is going to be my base page. This is 6 5/16 by 4.5. The 5/16 is the first line right after 6 1/4. So it's just a hair bigger than 6 1/4 by 4.5. This matting is 6 by 4 1/4, and that's meant to sit right in here. This size here, this you want to cut at 6 1/2 by 4 1/4, and all you would do is use an edge punch of your choice. So again, that's 6 1/2 by 4 1/4. We will be scoring this at 1/2 inch on the top, and this one is 6 1/2 by 4 1/2, and we're going to be scoring a 1/2 inch on the top. Okay, so this is going to sit like this, and then this piece will sit on this. So the first thing I like to do is go ahead and score it. And again, we're scoring at a 1/2 inch on this piece and this piece as well. Now I'm going to use my bone folder and fold those over. Now the next thing I need to do is to add my magnet. I am putting the magnet on the top of this. You can also put it on the back, however it will show. There's nothing to hide it. So if you put it on the front, we're going to be covering it up with this piece of paper, then you have a chance to go ahead and hide it. So let me go ahead and grab some magnets here. And my glossy accents. I've never tried a wet glue. You could possibly use a wet glue if you don't have glossy accents. You can definitely use ATG if you prefer to do that. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do is, well, first I'm going to let that dry for just a minute and I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back. I've given this just probably about 3 minutes to dry, and the next thing I want to do is add my magnet to this. So this folded edge, this part that we scored, will be folded over the top of this, and these should be the exact same size on the sides, which is 4 1/2. So you just kind of want to get that in place, hold it in place. I'm going to get my other magnet ready, and on the back side of this, just let my magnet go and it'll adhere to the other side. Once it does, get your glue ready. Same way we did this on the pocket. Add your glossy accents or whatever glue of your choice, and then lay that down. And I'm going to hold that there for just a minute. Okay, I'm going to lightly peel that up and allow that to dry just a minute. So in the meantime, I will go ahead and adhere my piece on this. This is a piece of paper that I cut from the same collection. I added this flourish on it. I printed it out, and I used an Allie Edwards stamp that says "Celebrate the Stories of Today." And I cut this from my Cameo. You can use a edge punch if you have one. So same thing, this is going to be, now if you can see here, when I scored it, I folded it the opposite way of the way I said earlier, and that's what I was talking about when I said it can cause the paper to crack. When you score it, you want to fold it backwards, and I scored it on this side and folded it the same way, but no big deal. I'll put a little bit of ink on that and I should be able to hide that, no problem. Okay, so back to what I was saying, I'm going to get this exactly where I want, hold it, and add some hot glue to it and flip it over. Now this is where you would want to add ribbon now if you're going to add ribbon. I decided I'm not going to, so I've added some tape on here. I'm going to remove the tape backing and just adhere this down. I'm going to add a little bit of wet glue right in this intricate part on the edge. Okay, now this piece I'm going to add my base piece to. I'll use a little ATG tape. And I'm just trying to leave a little bit of a border around this, the edges all the same. Okay, so this is what's going to adhere to the front of my book, so I'm going to add my tape to this. Make sure my magnet's still down here. Now I just want to do the same thing. I want to get this in place. I felt my magnet grab. I want to make sure it's even on both sides. Flip it over and remove this tape to adhere it down. Okay. Now I need to add another piece of tape for when I glue it onto my book. And I'll go ahead and remove the tape. I'll bring my book back in and add this to the front. If you wanted to leave a little spot open on the side to add a journaling card, you can do that as well. And now I'm very lightly going to set this down. That way I can pull it back up if need be, if I think that it's crooked. Okay, I'm happy with that. I'm going to go ahead and press that down. So now that gives us a magnetic closure for the front. The other thing I'd like to show you is to do a flip open page. I think I have one in here. Okay, oh, right here. So this one opens to reveal more spots for photos. So let's go ahead and do one of those. I used black paper again, 2 pieces, 6.5 by 9, and we're going to score them at 4.5. The reason I'm doing it this way is this will allow the size 4 by 6 photos to still be fit in this flip up. Okay, so I'm scoring them at 4.5. I've placed it on the 9-inch side, scoring it at 4.5. Same on this one, scoring it at 4.5 on the 9-inch side. Okay, now you simply want to, where that bump is, fold into that bump. Give it a good crease. And now we're just going to glue these together. Right, this way I won't have to worry about it. So I'm simply overlapping them and adding glue and gluing them together. So what I like to do is just add majority of glue around here. I always get the edges. And now, being that this one is placed on top, I'm going to add the glue to the edge here so I know that it's glued from edge to edge. And you just want to take it up to that score line without going over the score line. With the wet glue, it gives you a minute to kind of adjust it how you need to. I am going to use another magnet closure, so I'm getting my magnets ready here. And here's going to be our flip open book. Now the next thing I like to do is add my magnets before the pattern paper, of course. Okay, that's a little extra, but that's okay. Okay, and I'm going to let that sit another minute and sit a few minutes, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've let that sit another probably about 3 minutes, and I'm going to do the same thing. Just let my magnet fall on that, add my glossy accents, and close my book. I'll hold that there for a minute. Okay, it's not sticking yet. So when it does this, what I do is just go ahead and add another dot of glossy accents right there where I can see that the magnet lays. And then I will split apart my magnets and add it to the side there. Sometimes it just needs a little longer to dry than what I'm giving it. Okay, now in the meantime, to mat this with paper from the same collection, you need 5 pieces of 6 1/4 by 4 1/4. And what that will do is leave the person who receives this album a matting for their 4 by 6 photos. So you just want to decide how you want your papers. And I think I'm going to use that on the front. Okay. And then go ahead and mat your papers. So I decided to add ribbon, and if you're going to add any type of ribbon or anything like that, you want to do that before you adhere down this paper. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. I might add a flower on top of it. I'll wait till I decorate it. And if you wanted to add ribbon around the entire book, you could do that, but the magnetic closure keeps it closed. So this is what we have. This allows for another 4 photos. So now I will go ahead and add my tape to the back to adhere it down to one of the pages. So with a photo album this size, there are 12 pages, each one with a mat. I have gotten about 3 dozen photos. If you utilize every space, every mat, every pull-out, and the pockets, the pocket that we put in, you can get lots of photos in an album this size. If you double it and do 2 of the spines, the stack the deck spines, you can get 12 of them, and you just, like I said, make the spine a little bit larger. You can get just a ton of photos in them. So I'm just going to decide where I want my book. I want to make sure it's facing the right way. I'm going to decide where it looks best. Where I usually put it is on a page that has a little bit less of a pattern. You could always place it on the back as well. Yeah, I think I'm going to put it there. I just want to double check. Okay, so the only other thing I have done so far is I've cut some mats. These are 4 3/4 by 6.5, and I will mat them with pattern paper on them also, but these will fit in the pockets. So now would be the time if you want to cut out mats, and you can do that. And the other thing I prepared ahead of time is I cut a coin envelope with the same paper collection, and I will be adding that on the back. I will probably leave an opening to stick a journaling card on the side. So if you have a die cut, or if you, I know there's the Maya Rhodes coin envelopes, any type of coin envelope, you can even get them from the office supply, is great on the back. That way they can add ephemera, receipts, or more photos in. So this is the end of part 3. I hope you're enjoying this series, and I will be back with you in the next part 4 to finish off the album and decorate it. Thanks for joining me.